What's up, guys? We are back. It's been a long time. Just give you an update on what's been going on with me. Sold my house in Tennessee a couple weeks ago, hopefully at the top of the market. And I'm in Florida right now. Kind of got a new setup, you can see. So just been getting that all done. Got some new technology here to kind of increase the production of the show, which should be good. And we're going to start putting out content more consistently. And that's only going to get better and better from here on out. Again, I apologize for the hiatus. Now, remember, hit subscribe, hit like, share the video, and today I want to address some of the stuff that our administration here has been talking about with the economy. As you know, we are now past our second consecutive quarter of negative GDP growth. For those of you that don't know, I've worked in finance for about 7 years. I have pretty much every investment license you can hold. Series 7, 6, 65, 63, all of them. Also have my life and health insurance license. I also have degrees in economics. It's kind of my specialty. Every single one of those, be it when I was in college, and on every single investment license exam I ever took, which, by the way, is regulated by the government, defines a recession as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. That's it. Why? Because we base our economic strength or how well we're doing based off the growth rate of our GDP. So if the GDP is falling, therefore it is receding, and we are in a recession. It is a natural cycle of an economy. It's normal. What's not normal is the government thinking, which we have done throughout history, and it has only caused more problems, that it can intervene. That Keynesian way of thinking, all right? And it's getting worse now because now we are starting to subscribe to this modern monetary theory, where the government can set demand, print as much money as they want because they're a sovereign nation, and then use taxation plus interest rates as a way to control the supply of money that they have put too much into circulation. And it's a huge fundamental problem because taxation becomes not a way to get revenue to pay for government expenditures, but a way to control the supply of money, and that's it. Therefore, they're only going to take money away from you from taxation, a coercive tax, by the way, because you're making too much and there's too much money out there, not to pay for social necessities, which I don't agree with anyway. We do not have modern monetary theory here in the United States, but we are going down that route. We have a lot of people in Congress that subscribe to it, like AOC. When I see Biden tweeting something like this, the Inflation Reduction Act would be the most significant legislation in history to tackle the climate crisis and improve our energy security right away. You have a couple of different problems here. By the way, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, if you look it up online, it will take you to the Democrats' website. It is HR 5376. HR 5376 is the Build Back Better plan. What they've done is they have renamed it. But if you go look at the PDF, it still says Build Back Better on the legislation. They're just rebranding it. The Build Back Better plan was going to be extremely expensive, like $5 trillion or more. There was nothing in that bill that was going to reduce inflation. Anytime Congress or the president says that they are going to implement some kind of action or law or legislation that's going to combat inflation, they are lying. What causes inflation? Okay, well, I'm going to go back to the Friedman economics, all right, because it is the best form there is, in my opinion, as far as what is out there. There's one thing that causes inflation, just one. They argue, well, there's 3 different types. There's only one thing that can cause inflation, and that is a rapid increase in the supply of money per current output. The value of money is driven by supply and demand, okay, and the price of goods is driven by supply and demand. Yet, the government, or via the Federal Reserve, is the only entity in this world that can control the printing of the American dollar. The only entity in this world. We are a sovereign nation. So how can inflation be anyone's fault other than the very entity that controls the supply of money itself? So how do they combat inflation? The Federal Reserve will do so by increasing interest rates. Now, increasing interest rates has an indirect effect on, let's say, mortgage rates. It's not directly tied to mortgages, but you will see mortgage rates rise, even though right now I think you're actually seeing them fall a little bit because of all the borrowing that goes behind the scenes for that very money to get that mortgage. So they increase interest rates to pull money out of supply. That is the Fed's job. Nothing more, but the Fed tries to do too much. When our government is saying we're going to create this bill that is nothing but government spending, that's the Keynesian bullshit that we have come to know so well, all right? It's only going to make matters worse. Think about this. We have a problem of too much money and not enough goods. So they want to print more money with the same amount of production, or a slight increase in production, maybe. The government is trying to artificially set demand, and it's a problem. The free market sets demand, and therefore supply is set by the demand of the free market. Instead of focusing on letting the individuals in our society act in their own self-interest and meet the demands of the market itself, our government is going down the Marxist way of thinking that society knows best and the government knows best and can set demand for the individuals, and that's backwards. In fact, ultimately, 100% of the time, it leads to failure of economic systems. If Joe Biden could ever come to me and say, hey, we are going to be able to stabilize gas prices below $2.50. The reason I say $2.50 is because that's what it was prior to when he was in office, without any impact on the free market. Show me a way, Biden. But their only suggestions is to basically nationalize the oil industry, or at least the pricing of the commodity itself, and then nationalize the pricing of the gas itself, which, by the way, isn't set by the oil companies like you think, and control what the price of gas is regardless of demand or regardless of supply. Nixon did the same exact thing, and that's what ultimately led to the gas crisis in the 70s. You want to say, oh, well, it was the oil embargo? No, Nixon's price controls on gas is what caused a huge supply issue along with the embargo, because people's demand is it's endless. Think about this, realistically, the government artificially shuts down the economy during COVID. Artificially, we had a booming economy. Then they create a virus, by the way, so the government fucked up there. Then they artificially shut down the booming economy because of said virus, and people are getting laid off. So people are not going to be making that money. They are reducing their incomes, realistically. Therefore, demand for especially luxury goods, but anything other than a necessity itself, would fall. And you would see supply in the short term kind of stay stable or more stable because no one's buying that stuff. And then in the long term, supply would start to adjust to what that needed demand is, depending on how long the lockdowns lasted. There are several factors on why that occurs, but ultimately, the only reason demand would be up during COVID is if people were getting money from the government because they're not working and buying all those goods. Now you could say, well, that was needed. Maybe so. I'm not a Keynesian by any means of the word. I don't think government intervention is the way at all. I think the government has a role. I'm not an anarchist, but overall, the free market needs to take care of the free market. And the free market needs to take care and learn from its own failures and adjust accordingly, but they do not need the government telling them what and what not to do. So the government is printing money during COVID, 25% of all the money ever printed in the history of the United States, by the way, in a short period of time, and giving it out to the people. But also, on top of that money, on top of the stimulus, on top of the increased child tax credits, on top of the PPP loans, is giving money out in the U.S. and to other countries for reasons that have nothing to do with COVID at all. So the 9% inflation that we're experiencing right now is a result of not just COVID-related expenditures, but non-COVID-related expenditures in the form of a COVID stimulus package, most of which came in the form of Biden's American Rescue Plan, which was the largest of the COVID stimulus packages, and it was widely unneeded. So to say that, well, we've created 11 million jobs, great. Our workforce is actually lower than what it was prior to COVID. Well, nominal wages are up. People are getting paid more than they were before COVID. Yeah, but real wages are down when you adjust those for inflation. They're negative. People are getting paid more, but they're actually worth less. So you're better off at this, this time last year after COVID and prior to COVID with the lower wage. Inflation is 9% year over year. The stock market is down. There is this misconception that the stock market only impacts the upper 1%. False. The stock market, impacts over 50% of American workers because they have money either through the form of a pension or a 401k tied up in the stock market. When the stock market does bad, everyone does bad. Also, when the stock market does bad, companies that participate in that stock market in the form of public trading are taking hits. They're not getting the money from the investors, so they have to go and raise debt. All right? And when they have to raise debt, it is far more risky on a company. And if they're taking more risk, what do you think that's ultimately going to lead to? Let's say they have reduced earnings. They have, because of higher expenses, by the way, because of inflation, they have more debt and likelihood of defaulting on that debt. Well, now it's passed on to the laborers and it's passed on to the consumer. It's all a big cycle. So to say that, well, we only have, 2 negative quarters of GDP and that's it, and we're not in a recession, you're full of shit, because why are we having 2 negative quarters of GDP growth? The story is much larger. It is very incompetent for the president and his administration to make a statement as such. Furthermore, the government cannot spend its way out of inflation because government spending is what caused inflation in the first place. It is the sole reason in this example too, by the way, on why we have inflation, the way we have it. What the government needs to do is cut its budget in half. All right? It doesn't need to adjust, it needs to lower tax rates. Yet their goal is to spend more and increase tax rates, especially on the upper class, to try and gain revenue to spend that money. If the way to combat inflation is to reduce the supply of money or increase the demand for money, then how do you do that? By taking revenue away from an individual and putting that revenue right back into the economy the way that you see fit and not the way the individual sees fit. That's just a zero-sum game. You're not reducing the supply of anything. And on top of that, you're going to take out more long-term debt on a national basis to fund more spending. And the bills that they're promoting have no sure way of offsetting the increase in spending. Inflation is not going to go down. It is only going to go up with these ambitious policies. This is going to hurt, okay? Nothing about inflation, it's like a drug. It's good when it's kind of starting because everyone's investments are growing in the beginning. Money's out there, the economy's booming, but once it's there, once it's set in stone, oh shit, inflation is at 4%, 5%, 6%, 8%, 9%, and wages aren't keeping up with it. It's like a drug. You're coming down. You're going through withdrawal. And the only way to get off of drugs is to go through that hard withdrawal period. We are sobering up now. And it's going to suck. And people got to realize that. But the government needs to acknowledge that. And they need to acknowledge it not by saying, well, if Russia invades Ukraine, it's going to hurt. Gas prices are going up. No. They need to say, look, inflation is up. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to be better. We're going to budget better. We're not going to spend as much. We're going to be more hands-off on the free market. We're going to let the free market do what the free market does. And that will work itself out. But instead, they try to intervene, do too much, and it only causes more problems. The government has no responsibility to help individuals. Individuals have responsibility, the government does not. Okay? Elected officials have responsibility. Society does not have responsibility. Individuals do. Okay? And when you limit the freedoms of individuals that make up a society, you do not have a freer society. And that goes against everything that the Democrats run on. They think we're going to benefit for society. We're going to benefit the community. We're going to go around and promote this Marxist bullshit ideology that has never worked. And we're going to do so at the expense of individual Americans' freedoms. And there's no piece of legislation that has been promoted or even passed by this administration that has promoted freedom on an individual level. None. Just let people do what they need to do. Let them act in their own self-interest. It's as simple as that.